Well, I've just got my day ticket. This is the fantastic Barston Lakes. We've got incredibly bright sunshine today, clear blue skies. Last night was the first heavy frost that I'm aware of, and this is going to be the perfect opportunity to show you some of the up-to-date autumn cage feeder tactics that we're now employing, and certainly what I'm putting into my fishing. The last time I did a video like this, it was probably 2 years ago, and in that time quite a few things have changed. You know, I'm using a slightly different rig, the way that I use my ground bait, and the way that I actually approach venues like this for skimmers and bream when the temperatures got really cold coming into winter. It is November. Quite a few of those things have changed, and that's what this update is all about. This is a session video. I'm going to head down the left hand bank, down the roadside, which is where you can park behind your peg, and it might be a slow start, but it's going to give me a great opportunity to show you some of the things that we're now putting into our cage feeder fishing. I'm down the roadside now. It's there are a few anglers here. That sun looks like it's going to be in for the day. I'm going to fish this peg today. This is peg 95. Not a fantastic area by any means. It's not known for being great, but that's part of the reason why I want to fish here. Because it's gone so cold, it's going to be interesting to see what this approach, you know, what we catch on this today. There isn't much wind hitting it just here, but that wind is really cold. So I think this is going to be the spot. So I'm going to get the gear out of the van and just talk you through the mix and the rigs and everything, and then obviously finally the approach. But the main thing is, I think it's going to be a really interesting winter session. So the first task of the day is to just mix up some ground bait. Now, I'm not just going to blind anyone with science with ground baits. This is the one that I've caught more fish with over the last 12 months than any other mix. That is the one that I was going to use, but I'm not quite sure about the consistency of that. So I'm going to go with one that I know works really well during winter, and that's the good old match method dark. There's quite a bit of feed in this as regards pellets, okay, micro pellets. And I picked this just because it's darker as well. I've got a lot of confidence in it. It's a darker mix, you know, and when you're looking at mixes, basically, I don't overcomplicate things. Blended fish meals and crushed pellets. Anything that's pellet based, it needs to be fish meal. The clearer the water goes, the darker the mix I use. Simple as that. And obviously, if you think it is going to be mega hard, then just have a look at the food quantity, what's in it. You know, some mixes have got loads of feed in. This one has got a bit of feed in it. There are micro pellets in there. You'll see more in about half an hour once this mix is taken in some of the water. So this is the mix I'm going with on its own, just because it's a flexible mix. You can fish with it in different consistencies, which is something I'm going to show you a bit later on when we get fishing, because the consistency of it can actually be more important than the actual mix that you select. That's something we can do once we get fishing. I'm going to give that 20 minutes, half an hour now. It's going to dry out a bit as it soaks in the water. I can get on with getting the rest of my kit ready. As regards to water clarity, it is starting to go clearer. It's not by any means clear at the moment, but generally the clearer the water, the darker the mix, and that's why I've gone with that mix today. I'll show you the rig and everything once we get fishing, but the first thing I really want to do is, on this sort of venue, particularly this venue, there is very little fluctuation in depth. There's nothing. It's literally that deep everywhere. So on this venue, you're not looking for drop-offs, you're not getting a stopwatch, getting an idea how deep it is and all that sort of thing. For me, with this approach, it's more about what's actually on the bottom. Now, this time of year, I like to try and go a little bit further out. You know, experience has really told me, not only on this venue, but lots of venues, the fish, as it gets colder and colder, are less reluctant to come closer in, so they tend to stay that little bit further out. So if you have a line in that's really short, it's quite risky, you know, because the fish may never come in that close, or if they do come in, it might be so late on in a match that you know it's too late for you to capitalize on it. So by searching the swim out, I always have a look to see what the bottom's like. Now on this venue, I'm looking for gravel. Okay, so what I would basically do is I like to start quite short just to get an idea of what it's like close in. So I'll put the bomb out to there. And then when you're looking for gravel, it's easier doing this with braid than what it is with mono. And all you're basically doing is, I like to use a 30 gram bomb or an ounce bomb. And all I simply do is, when the bomb's hit the bottom, just drag the bomb across the bottom. And obviously experience will show you how reading your tip is going to give you an idea of what the bottom's like out there. But what you'll generally find is that when it's over silt or over a soft bottom, the tip is really going to drag in and when you're pulling the bomb, the tip bends right round to it. Okay, however, on the flip side of that, if you do manage to find some gravel, which there isn't gravel everywhere on this venue or on most venues, but there are patches in areas, if you are going to find a patch, as you drag your bomb over the top of that gravel, your tip almost rattles. It's so obvious. If you was to drag your bomb over the road here, that's exactly the same impression that you get. Okay, and I just know from experience of fishing this venue like this for probably the last 8 years, fishing for skimmers through winter and through summer as well, that if you can fish over gravel, your bites will be much better. When you fish over soft silt like that, even if your approach is right, just because of the bottom, it can lead to line bites, it can lead to foul up fish. The fish are having to root around in the bottom, so you often see bubbles coming up, and all that is working against what you're trying to do. If you can fish on a nice solid hard bottom, then your bites are going to be cleaner, the fish can pick up the bait better, and it ultimately, because of that experience, it gives me a loads more confidence. So I'm gonna have a good search round now to see if I can find something within a decent range, see if there's any gravel, and that's where I'll be clipping up to fish. Well, I've spent a good 10 minutes out there with the bomb and I haven't found any gravel whatsoever. So all I'm going to do is pick a range. I don't really like to go past 30 meters, so I'm just going to pick a range of 30 meters, just see what the bottom's like out there and just see how that looks in relation to the swim. And if we've got to fish over a soft bottom, then so be it, but sometimes, like I say, you just haven't got the luxury of fishing over a harder bottom, so that's where I'm going to start. Now I've got to admit that I've actually changed where I'm fishing. I thought 30 meters was going to be alright, but I've clipped the bomb on, gone back out there, and the bottom's incredibly soft. Just dragging the bomb, the tip was bending right around, and I just wasn't happy fishing on that, so I've come back 3 meters. All I did was drag the bomb back slowly from that 30 meters range just to find out where it went a little bit more firm, a little bit more solid. So I've come back 3 meters, so I'm actually at 27 meters now. That's exactly what it works out at. That just gives me a lot more confidence. So I'm going to put 3 feederfuls of bait in on that line. I'm going to fish super negative but quite active, try and just keep popping the feeder in, try and work it. That's how I used to fish here 8, 7, 6 years ago when I first started coming here through winter. I don't know if that approach is going to be right. If it's not right, then obviously I can slow things down, put the rod down and just leave it in a little bit longer. But it's we're not expecting a quick start, we're not expecting a fantastic start. It could get better as the day goes on, but I think we're going to have to ring a few changes today to keep the bites coming. So let me get some bait in and get the swim kick started. So I'll show you the rig once we've got some bait in. All I'm going to do is just feed with, I mean, that's a 4-roll cage. It's going to empty really nice and easily, really nice and quickly. It's only shallow, so I'm just going to kick start. Just want to get some bait out there first, and then I can show you the rig. Just really lightly squeeze it. You know, it's just simple stuff, but these are the things that make a big difference. We want this to empty straight away, so there's no point in packing it in really tight. Line up with your far bank marker, which is 27 meters away, and that one was just ground bait, as you've seen. I'm going to put a few dead reds in. Now, I didn't know I was going to be fishing like this today, all right? It's only because I woke up to such a harsh frost, so these were live maggots. This is not the best way to do dead maggots, dead reds, all right? What I've basically had to do is, because these were live, I've simply had to pour my red hot coffee on them to kill them, all right? That is a get out of jail way of doing dead reds. Some people don't know how to do that, but if you're ever desperate for dead reds and you haven't got any, then as you can see, some of them have gone whiter than others, and that's just because the coffee's so hot it's actually scalded them. But there are some really nice red ones in there as well, so that's not the best way to do dead reds. And that is all I'm going to be feeding with the ground bait. I'm not going to be putting any worms through. I'm not going to bother putting pellets through. The reason why I'm not putting pellets through is for 2 reasons. One is I don't want the fish eating the micro pellets because I can't put them on the hook, but within this ground bait there is quite a bit and tiny small pieces of pellet in there anyway. There are little micro pellets in there, and if I overwet the mix even more, they will become even bigger. So I think that's enough feed on its own. Okay, so all I'm going to do now is, because I'm going straight in on this line, I'm just going to put that many maggots, just that many maggots in this next cast. Get that in the cage, lightly squeeze it again. Okay, don't squeeze it too tight as well, because that can squeeze out a lot of the bait. Okay, and just go back out to your marker again. I'm just going to give that a few seconds, and then the final one I'm going to put in, I'm actually going to put in as a bit of a as an attraction to any fish that are in the area. Just strike that out gently. So I want that to empty right on the clip. So this last one I'm going to put in now, because I'm going to be going straight over this, that's why I haven't fed too much, is I'm going to squeeze this even lighter in the feeder. That's barely holding in. And what I'm going to do is empty that on the surface. So as soon as it hits the clip on the surface, empty it. So what that's going to do is cause a nice big cloud in the water, just to, if there are any fish in the nearby area, just for them to try and hopefully see the cloud come in, and if they do come into it, there's obviously ground bait there, but there's, you know, 8 to 10 maggots there as well. So this just gives me a chance now just to put my hook length on and get ready for that first cast, where I'm going to start off quite active, see if that's the right approach, see if I can trigger bites. And if not, all I'll do then is, just like we do end up fishing in winter a lot of the time, is I'll put the rod down and just be a bit more patient. So I'm going to kick off with double dead red. I picked out 2 really nice red ones, not some of the ones that are white. And I'm just going to start on probably 2 to 3 minute casts, just to get a feel for what's there. I'm not going to put much bait in, just try and rely more on the ground bait itself being enough to draw 1 or 2 fish in. Like I say, it was very, very cold last night, so I'm expecting a slow start. Obviously, as you'd expect, this first 20 minutes or so just going to give me an idea of how many fish are out there, but it is very much a case of being patient. Lots of people put too much bait in at the start, they blow the peg straight away, and then if they do get a visit, it might be really late on, the last half hour or so, when if you'd had a little bit more of a more cautious approach, then you might have picked off fish in the first, you know, 3 hours, 4 hours even. And then if it is going to be a good finish, then obviously you've got those fish that you caught late on to go with the others, and sometimes that's the best way of building your weight. Well, 2 casts now without an indication, but I'm not concerned in any way, because I know I haven't blown the peg. I've literally only fed about 12 maggots now. So I know that even if only 1 fish comes into the swim, the chances of it picking out the double maggot is really, really high. And that's just one of the things, you know, you've just got to be cautious of. There might not be many fish there. And what you've also got to remember, and this is something I'm going to do on this cast, or possibly after this cast, is if I don't catch on this cast, I'm going to cut the feed out altogether and just rely on the ground bait itself. I've kept the ground bait in its normal consistency, if you want to call it that, at the moment, but with a mix like this, and with lots and lots of pellet based mixes like this, you can actually change the consistency of it by adding more water, and that will give you a completely different effect in the actual water itself. It's something that often gets not really overlooked, but a lot of people have never tried it, but it is something that can trigger you an extra fish or 2. And that will be bringing in more of a cloud through the water, like a wet cloud as we call it. But that's something that a mix like this, it gives you that versatility. So if I don't get anything on this cast, I'm going to start introducing just ground bait and see if we could just find an initial fish, and hopefully just start to get some sort of an idea of you know, that there's 1 or 2 fish out there, just by, even if we could just start getting indications, then obviously the next step then will be to turn those indications into fish. That was an instant bite, really quick bite. I'm not sure if this is a skimmer actually, I'm not sure. Decent fish. Thought it could have been a stocky carp when I first hooked it. As you saw, that was straight away. I've had 3 casts now with just ground bait, just fishing for that first fish, for that first bite. By fishing like that, if there's only going to be 1 or 2 fish there, then obviously the chance of them picking your hook bait out, this has come to the top right out there, you just stand a really high chance of catching a fish, you know, even if there's only 1 there. But the one thing a lot of people forget with feeder fishing is that if it does turn out to be a better day than what you expected, we could just stop putting more feed in. You know, you're filling a little feeder up every cast. If there's suddenly more fish there than you expected, just stop putting a bit more bait in. It's just kiting to the left a little bit. I thought it may have been foul hooked when I first hooked it, but no, it certainly looks like it's a bream. It was actually a good bite, to be fair, but when you get bites straight away like that, they often are. That's a fantastic fish. Put that camera on so you can see this one. Look at that one, that's a beautiful stamp. That's a proper bream. Well, that's just by going a little bit more negative. Now, it can often be the way to catch. In fact, it is foul hooked. Look where it's hooked. Just at the side of its nose. Which is quite strange, but I mean, that's the stamp of fish that, you know, if you're going to try and build a weight on with bream on a venue like this, if you can single out that stamp, then obviously that is always going to be a benefit to you, as opposed to catching small skimmers. But there we go. Fantastic stamp of fish, that, isn't it? Brilliant. So we'll now find out if the negativity is what's going to keep the bites coming, or whether there are more fish there than what we think, but it's just going to take a while for them to start feeding. Off you go, mate. So all I'll do now is just repeat the process. Just go back out again with just ground bait. Obviously that's one fish, but there may be more out there, and if there is, then that's when we could start putting a little bit more feed in again, and that's when you're basically feeding to the bites that you're getting. So that's double maggot again on a size 16, and the hook length is 4 pound, which in this case diameter wise is 0.13, and it's 25 centimeters long. I'm a massive believer that when you're fishing like this, particularly in winter, and when you're fishing over a soft bottom, you really need to get away with, or try and use, the lightest feeder you could possibly get away with. You've already gone looking for harder areas of the swim to fish over. You don't want to compound that, where if you have got to fish over silt by fishing a feeder that's going to be sinking into the silt, because you're just compounding the problem even more. So you want to get away with the lightest feeder you can get away with, and obviously the conditions and the range that you're fishing will determine the weight of the feeder that you use, but that's why you carry a different selection. That looks like it's on. Again, this is on double maggot, double dead red. And I just put 4 or 5 maggots in that time. Didn't get any more indications on just ground bait. Decent sized skimmer, obviously not as big as the other one. The hooks come out in the net. Even those are a nice stamp if they keep coming. But I had to feed a bit for that. Fantastic condition those, aren't they? Beautiful condition. But I did have to feed for that one, so it might be a case of just switching it up. Feast and famine sometimes works on here, where you actually feed one cast and then don't feed anything for the next 2 or 3, you know. Sometimes that's the way to go. But what I'm going to do is put a bit more feed in again. There's about 5 maggots. Just go in again with just about 5 maggots in the feeder, again with double maggot on. We'll see if they want see if they're going to respond to a bit more of a positive approach. There we go, that was an indicator. There we go, it's gone straight round. Such quick bites, you know, and there could be a couple of reasons for that. We are, you know, trying to overcomplicate and overthink things, but sometimes you get quick bites because the fish might have just seen the plop of the feeder, and then they've gone straight to it, and then that's when obviously they see your 2 maggots and they nail it straight away. That can be a reason. But another theory as well is sometimes, and it's not something I've really had on this venue, but and I've heard other anglers talk about it, is that sometimes when you get bites as quick as that, it's because there isn't enough bait down there. Sometimes there might be more fish there than what you think, and so because they're competing so much for it, they've got to take it straight away, otherwise they just don't get it. But I don't think that'll be the reason today. But as always, with every form of fishing, just trying to get that fine balance, you know, get that balance right between feeding enough to keep the fish there, keep them interested, but then you still want them to be competing. See, that's another proper bream, that one. They're the stamp that you need. Very heavy fish. Just hooked in the corner of its mouth. They are the fish that will make a massive difference with this approach. Some days you can only catch, you know, £half-pound skimmers, fish like that, you know. That's when you're looking at 20, 30, 40 pounds even some days. Beautiful stamper fish. Now, as regards the rig and the setup, this is one of the things that certainly has changed over the last couple of years. I've experimented with lots and lots of different rigs, and without going into too much detail, without banging on about all the different sorts of rigs for different scenarios, the best thing I always say to anyone, whether I'm out on a coaching session or in any of the course videos or whatever, is that if you're not missing bites, and if you're not getting entangles, then quite often I can't see much reason why you would change your rig from what you're using now. But if you are getting entangles, if you're missing bites, then that's something that you possibly need to look at, you know. Is there a better rig that you can be using? Now, there are lots of rigs out there that I know some of the top anglers use, and I've obviously tried them out over the last couple of years, and for me personally, some of them just don't work for me. I tried a different rig yesterday, for example, on a different venue, and the first 3 skimmers that I hooked, I lost all 3, and that's because that rig just wasn't working for me. And the reason why I know that is because I immediately took that rig off and went back to this rig that I'm using now, and I never lost a fish for the rest of the session, you know. So when you're talking about rigs, particularly if you're fishing with braid like I am today, some of it might be down to the way that you play the fish. You might be a little bit more aggressive, the rod might be a little bit tougher than some of the other rods out there. Now, one of the problems I had with fishing braid direct is lost fish, you know, and this setup is a setup where I just do not lose fish. We've got the planes going up again today, so you can probably hear those in the background. But for me, for this sort of fishing at this range, I've got a nice 3000 reel, balanced lovely with an 11-foot rod. Okay, this is 3.3 meter slim. It's a lovely soft rod. That's why I mentioned the name of the rod, because some rods, whilst they might be the same length, they're not as forgiving, they're not as soft, and that might be a reason why you're losing fish if you're fishing like this. It's just thinking about all the little details and aspects of your setup. I love to fish it with a 1 ounce tip, because just about everywhere I go at this range there is some sort of tow, and with a 1 ounce tip I just think it's just right for when you get the tow that can appear on these shallower lakes. Okay, I've got braid, it's 0-10 submerged braid right the way through. However, I've got a 50 centimeter shock leader. As you can see there's a knot, a really small knot, and that is 8-pound line, and that is the part of the rig where I've got some sort of elasticity. If I pull that, you can see how much stretch there is there, and that's the bit that stops me. It takes off the harshness of braid direct, and it means I don't lose fish. Okay, so you've got it, or I've got enough stretch there for the way that I fish it. Free running rig, it's a free running feeder. I haven't got a feeder link or anything on there, just a snap link swivel. It's free to run. I'll stop that with a rubber float stop or a feeder stopper rubber. Okay, that, obviously I can slide that if I wish, and that just slides down to a knot. That knot there only serves one purpose, and that is to stop that sliding any further down. As it is now, it won't move anyway, but if I suddenly wanted to go to 40 meters where I've got to punch the feeder a little bit harder, that knot stops that from slipping in anyway, and it's peace of mind. It doesn't do any harm being there. That's all that is. And then I've got a small piece of line there, and I've got a loop on there, and that's where I attach my hook length, loop to loop, and that is it. There's very, very little on there to tangle. There's very little to go wrong there. So I've still got plenty of directness with the braid, but that 50 centimeter shocker just puts enough elasticity into it. And the added feature for me when I'm fishing like this, if you have got fish around the feed, particularly skimmers or even bigger bream, this bit here, because it's 8-pound, because it's quite stiff, it's heavier than the braid, it just helps pin the rig down behind the feeder and around the feed area for 50 centimeters, and I feel that just helps stop any sort of liners when you've got grazing fish there getting caught up on the braid, because the braid obviously can take a while to sink because it's much more supple and lighter, and I think that just helps pin it down out of the way. So with a rig like that, there's not much to go wrong, and that's the one that I've used exclusively for when I'm fishing braid direct for 2 years now. That's another one. So I've been out there about a minute. They're definitely responding to that bait now. It was a slow start. Like I said, the first couple of fish really caught with mainly ground bait, but now I'm only putting about 5 maggots in each cast. Still got double maggot on. And it's funny how if you get a bite straight away when the feeder goes in, they nearly pull the rod in. But if you have to sit and wait for a bite like I did on that one, I only had to wait about a minute, but obviously I know it's not exactly really waiting for a bite, but when you don't get a bite straight away, the bites are really, really tentative, really just like what you'd expect in cold water. But sometimes the simple reason for that is, and this is probably going to prove my point, is that when you're getting little delicate bites like that, quite often it means it's because the fish, when it's taking the bait in, it's still feeding on the ground bait and the bits of maggots what are still there. You know, they basically haven't swam off. If they swim off, that's when you get a great bite. And while I'm talking about that, the hook bait is down. So it's taken the bait really well, really confidently. And that's what happens when they're on the feed. When you're getting those little indications, it quite simply means that the fish is, off you go mate, quite simply it means that the fish is taking the bait in. Because it's still grazing, that's why you haven't had a great bite, but they're definitely responding to just 5 maggots each cast now. So I'm going to keep doing that, see if it gets stronger, see if it gets worse, and if we've got to change something then we will. We've still got a few things we can try. I'm expecting it to slow down, and that's going to give the opportunity to show you a couple of tricks, a couple of things that can trigger those extra fish when it goes quiet. It's a pretty little bonus, that one. Look at that one, beautiful. Well, the swim is ticking over really nicely at the minute, but it's starting to slow down. I've tried just cutting back on the feed, and it's just it's slowly getting worse. I can feel it slipping away from me. I'm getting the odd fish, but you know when you get the feeling that there's more fish there than what you're actually catching, that's exactly what's happening at the moment. So I'm going to start making 1 or 2 changes now, just to try and trigger some extra fish until we get into that last period, where we're expecting the last part of the session to be the best anyway, just like it is in summer. Certainly in winter that can be the best part of the session. So just going to try a few little tweaks now, just to try and trigger some extra fish. For those people that don't know about Barston Lakes is a day ticket water. All right, I'm over on the roadside. This is where you can see the road, obviously. Over there, that's the riverside. So as you look at it from the clubhouse, that is on your right hand side. You can't drive down that bank, so you will need a barrow if you're going to go fishing there. And then here, over on the roadside, as you can expect, you can park behind your peg. But it is a day ticket water, so you can just go into the clubhouse and get your day ticket. So now I'm just going to go into a couple of little triggers that we can usually put into place, where it's just going to catch you a few of those extra fish before you get into that hopefully better latter period. So one of the first things I always try on these sorts of sessions or in a match is what I call a low risk trigger. Basically, if I add some extra water like that to the ground bait, you're actually changing the cloud and the effect of it when it actually goes into the water. Now obviously this is a little bit trial and error at first. Obviously have it too wet, then it's not going to stay in the feeder, it's going to empty on the grass behind you. And by over wetting it like that, you get a completely different cloud, and sometimes that's enough to just draw 1 or 2 fish in. So this is first cast on the over wet mix. I think I've got it just about wet enough so it's going to hold in this feeder. Sometimes it's trial and error. And it's good to experiment with some feeders, because some feeders are better at holding onto a wet mix than others. So some feeders you can get away with a wetter mix. It actually holds into the feeder better. And obviously it helps if you've got a nice smooth cast as well. That didn't take long, did it? First cast on the wet mix. It's been out there about 4 minutes. That's definitely triggered a response. And this is just one of the things that you can do at any stage during the match. You know, it's not something that sometimes you can keep on doing and keep catching. Sometimes you just do it every now and then and it triggers you an extra couple of fish. So that's definitely one of the things to bear in mind when you're fishing like this. And the other one as well is sometimes just a period, I call it a period of activity. You know, you might be sat there leaving it out there 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and sometimes the fish just need kind of waking up sometimes. And one of the things that you can do is, I haven't done it yet today, but it's just one that I wanted to share with you, and that is that sometimes you can just put a couple of feederfuls in really quickly, sometimes opening up on the surface and then going over the top and sitting on the next one. Sometimes if the fish have just kind of drifted away a little bit, we might have carp and F1s out there disturbing these bream, so that's not going to help them settle. So by doing that, sometimes it just triggers to any fish that are in the, you know, in the area or within the vicinity of your peg, just to come and see a cloud just to kind of get them to come and have a look what's there, and then obviously you can have another run of fish that way. So that's what I refer to as a period of activity. But sometimes just putting 2 in, might even be 3 quick feeder fulls in, just the same feeder that you're actually fishing with, and then sit on the next one. It's amazing how many times that can pick off some fish, but it's working really well now. That one's on. Yeah, the bites have got much more confident now. Now that they're really on that feed, this is another good fish. This will be one of the better bream, this one. So evident that stepping up that food, that, you know, the amount of maggots that I'm putting through, they've really responded positively to it. There you weight builders. They're the ones you want. Taking it well down as well. Another sign that the feeding really positive now. Well, it's been a really interesting session, and we've seen definite signs that winter is here. I really hope you've enjoyed this insight into how we fish venues like this now the water's going much colder. And if you'd like to see me on more winter session videos like this, please let me know by giving this one a thumbs up. And if you want to see more videos from this channel, please consider subscribing. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.